taking the time to join this webinar. So, today we'll be talking about how to get started with Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. This is part two, and this is going to be the very last session on the Microsoft Defender XDR Zero to Hero webinar series. So as I said in our previous sessions, we embarked on this journey sometime on February, and we managed to cover all the major products in Microsoft Defender XDR, which is Defender for Office 365, Defender for Identity, Defender for Endpoint, and we already did one session prior to this in Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps, and this is part two in Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. So myself, my name is Vignesh Ganeshan, and I work as an enterprise architect. I'm also a Microsoft MVP and MCT. With that, let me hand it over to my co-speaker, Samik, to introduce himself. Samik, over to you.
Hey, thank you, Vignesh. Hi, myself. I'm a Microsoft Security MVP as well as an MCT and author, helping customers to boost their security landscape. So with that, over back to you, Vignesh.
Thank you. All right, folks. So with no further ado, let's get started. So today we have let's say, a big agenda compared to normally what we would do on our sessions. I mean, this being the last session, we thought let's try to squeeze in some more topics and try to complete it, right? So we will be talking about the SaaS security posture management in Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. Then we'll jump into threat protection and then information protection, then the app governance, right? So these are the four main pillars that we want to talk in today's session. In the previous session, we touched base on the Microsoft Cloud App Discovery, which is basically something which helps you to do a discovery. It gives a complete bird's eye view on all the SaaS solutions that are being used in your environment, right? So we were done with that. So today we want to focus on all the other remaining four features and capabilities, which is SSPM, threat protection, information protection, and app governance. And then we'll also do a demo on all these four capabilities, and then we can take some time for question and answers. So what is Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps? This is something which we already spoke about. So this is Microsoft's SaaSP, right? So as I said, it is not a product which was, directly engineered by Microsoft in the first place. This was a product which Microsoft, they purchased a company called as Adalom, and then there is a lot of other integrations which they did. And today this product is called as Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. Previously, it used to be called as Microsoft Cloud App for Security, and now it's called as Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. And this very product, or the Microsoft SaaSP, mainly focuses on these five main pillars, out of which the discovery of SaaS applications was covered in our previous session. Today, we want to talk about the remaining four. The first one being SaaS, which is nothing but, SSPM, which is nothing but SaaS Security Posture Management. So what I mean by that is, in organizations, there are so many SaaS solutions that you would be using. For instance, Microsoft 365 is one such thing, right? You could be using Google Workspace, you could be using Dropbox, you could be using, let's say, Workday. There are just so many SaaS solutions out there. So how do you make sure that there are no misconfigurations when we are configuring this? How do you make sure that the security posture is taken care of, right? How do you make sure that the SaaS solutions which are running, they meet the certain compliance requirements, right? They meet the security standards. So this is where the SSPM piece in Microsoft Defender for Cloud App comes in, because this is something that you can use to manage this SaaS security posture management for all the SaaS solutions that you're using in your environment, right? So Samik will be showing a demo on how to go about it. Then we'll also be talking about information protection. Now, if you've been using Microsoft products, specifically the Microsoft Defender and Microsoft Purview products, you would realize the fact that there is something called as Microsoft Information Protection, which basically takes care of doing all the information protection stuff for all the cloud workloads that you have. This could be the data that you put inside your SharePoint, Exchange, OneDrive, or stuff, or this could also be data which resides inside your Microsoft Azure resources. So Microsoft Information Protection and Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps, they work together to give this better together capability, wherein you could just take advantage of the labels there, and Defender for Cloud Apps comes in together, and there's a lot of cool stuff that you could do. But at a very high level, just think of this is nothing but MIP and your Defender for Cloud Apps capability coming together and offering you the information protection capabilities, right? And then you also have continuous threat protection. One thing that you need to that you need to keep on top of mind, specifically in the cloud world, is whatever is happening. any kind of damage that is being done to your environment, right? Your solutions that you use, the security solutions that you use, they should be quick enough to capture it. You can't even expect, say, for instance, the damage was done now, and after 5 minutes, if it is generating an alert or if it is sort of telling you that, hey, this is what happened, that 5 minutes is more than enough for the attacker to go ahead and do enough damage, right? So how does continuous threat protection happens, right? How does Defender for Cloud Apps offer the continuous threat protection capability, right? So that's what we'll be talking about in the threat protection when we are talking about continuous threat protection. And then we also have app to app protection, as the name itself says, right? In today's world, we are living with a lot of OAuth kind of stuff, right? This is one app having access on another app to sort of get some permissions or to access certain resources, right? This is good, but the only problem is how do you make sure that the permissions that one app is having on another app, you're not over permissioning things, right? How do you make sure that whatever permissions is given is the right set of permissions? And even if you're given permissions, how do you make sure that you can go ahead and revoke those permissions, right? So this is where the app to app protection comes into picture. So as I said, this is just a gist of things. So today we are planning to show a demo on all these capabilities. So let's jump right in. So SSPM. So as I said, so the SSPM, it offers a detailed visibility into the security state of your SaaS applications. It also provides actionable guidance to help you strengthen your security posture efficiently. So what I mean by this is, as I said, in an enterprise, there will be so many SaaS applications which are being used. What if there can be one single, let's say, a solution or one single product which can control, or which can make sure that it looks at all these SaaS solutions and tells you that, well, this is how the posture management is for this. It meets certain security standards, or this particular SaaS application, it doesn't meet a certain security standard. For instance, think of CIS, right? That's a well-known security standard. A lot of organizations, they keep doing a CIS benchmark assessment, right? There are so many such things that you have NIST, and there is a lot which is out there. So how do you make sure that the SaaS applications that you're using out there, they follow these security standards, right? And how can you make sure that that you have configured everything right properly in the right manner? So that's where the SSPM comes into picture. And as I said, this is just not only for Microsoft SaaS solutions. It can also be used for other third-party SaaS solution also, such as Google Workspace, Okta, Workday, and that is just pretty much about, I think, about, I don't remember the exact list off top of my head, but that is just a lot of things that you can go ahead and configure. And the SSPM feature in Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps will help you to do the security posture management for all the apps. So we'll be showing a demo on how that is done. The next one is information protection using MGDCA. So anybody who has used Microsoft Information Protection, specifically the sensitivity labels piece, you would understand the fact that it can help you to do discovery. It can help you to identify all the sensitive data in your organization. Right? It can also help you to classify those sensitive data, right? Which one should be highly confidential, which one should be less confidential, which one can be shared with people outside the organization, which one shouldn't be shared. So those kind of classifications are possible. And it also helps you to do protection, right? So even if it, well, let's say once you classify it, right? But how do you protect that? How do you make sure that people do not download something which is highly confidential, right? How do you make sure that people do not download a highly confidential file and share it with a competitor? And also, how do you make sure that how you can monitor what happens with your file? Because once it is outside of your tenant, right? Let's say you're sharing it. How do you make sure that what's happening to that file? So that's where MIP comes into picture. So MIP and MGDCA, they work hands in hand together, right? You can configure a lot of policies. One such favorite policy, which we would be demoing you today is, what if that is a highly confidential file, let's say in SharePoint or OneDrive? And how can you make sure that your users are not downloading it, even though you're the owner of that very specific file, right? What if we do not want you to download it on a non-domain joined computer? You can just open it on the web view, but you cannot download it. So those kind of, this is just one such use case or example, but there is a lot that you can do by bringing together your, MIP and MGDCA together. So this is what information protection with MGDCA is all about. The next one is continuous threat protection, right? So um, Defender for Cloud Apps, it offers built-in adaptive access control and provides user and entity behavior analysis and helps you mitigate malware. Now, those are two different terminologies, right? When you're saying adaptive access control. In today's world, it's not quite enough for you to have static access controls because that may just not fulfill your needs, right? It should be adaptive enough. The name itself says that it is adaptive, meaning it should be able to sort of blend according to the different scenarios, right? It cannot be that, well, this is a static policy. Either you do this or you don't do this, right? Either you get in or you don't get in. It cannot be that way because we live in a hybrid world. We are accessing a lot of cloud solutions. There can be so many permutations and combinations of that. So how can you configure policies which can sort of adjust accordingly? So that's where the adaptive access control comes into picture. Then also you have something called as user and entity behavior analysis, which is your UEBA. In very simple terms, how to put it is, say for instance, if you as an employee, right, every time you, let's say every day you go to office, let's say at 10 a.m., you log in from your corporate device sitting in your corporate, within your corporate network, right? And then you start working in Office 365, right? And maybe when you're at home, you're connected to your internet service provider, right? And then you open it, or maybe you're connecting to your VPN, right? So the system, the Office 365 system, it sort of understands, right? There is a machine learning algorithm. It sort of studies your profile, and it knows that, well, this particular user, this is what he keeps doing on a everyday basis, right? Now, out of nowhere, if you do something which is not quite normal, that's where it's going to raise a red flag. For instance, for the past 6 months, you've been logging in from constantly, let's say from Bengaluru, that's where I'm situated, right? Now, all of a sudden, if it sees a login from Hong Kong, right, it's going to raise a red flag and say that, well, this particular user, he always used to log in from, let's say, Bengaluru or within India, but out of nowhere, he's logging in from Hong Kong. And this is something which I don't feel which is quite right. So it's going to raise a red flag. I'm just giving an example about what UEBA is, but there's a lot that it could do, right? So these kind of things can be possible using your MGDCA. And you can also raise alerts since it is closely integrated with your Microsoft Defender XDR. It can also generate alerts, which can then create incidents, and then you can start doing all your, whatever things that you want to do. So the SOC team can start looking into it and stuff like that. Then finally, the app governance using MGDCA. So when I say app governance is nothing but app governance and Defender for Cloud Apps is a set of security and policy management capabilities designed for OAuth-enabled apps registered on Microsoft Entra ID, Google, and Salesforce. This is specifically made for the OAuth-enabled apps, and it is just not only for Microsoft Entra ID, it's also for Google and Salesforce, right? Because in an organization, you would often be getting these incidents, or somebody might be reaching out to you saying that, hey, that is this third-party app, we want to register this app on Microsoft Entra ID, and these are the API permissions this app would need on so and so app. It so happens that sometimes it could be like, well, this app should be able to read all the documents in a particular SharePoint site, or maybe this particular app should have read-only access to all the team's chat messages. And I'm not joking about this. I've seen requests like this, which keep coming quite often, right? But of course, there are certain business reasons to that. I'm not completely denying it, but then it should be done in a proper manner, right? If there is anything which says that it should have read-only access to all the users mailbox, that's kind of scary. You cannot have that, right? Or even if it is just for a POC purpose, right? If you're just trying to do it for a bunch of users mailbox, right? So, and most of the time what happens is you would give that access and then you would forget to remove those access. So the app governance is one place which is sort of going to keep a bird's eye view on all such things which are configured, so that, and it's also going to tell you that, as you can see in the screenshot here, these are all the overprivileged apps, right? And these are all the apps which have high privileged access, a bunch of those things. And you can also configure policies about what is doable and what is not doable, right? So with that, I think I'll hand it over to Samik to show a demo on all these capabilities and features that we just spoke about. So Samik, over to you.
Thank you, Vignesh. And let me share my screen. And in the meantime, Vignesh, there's a question in the chat around MIP and Azure Information Protection.
Well, these are, think of MIP as the new AIP, because it used to be called as Azure Information Protection before. So now Microsoft, with their renaming convention and stuff, they made it as Microsoft Information Protection, but it's just not that. There is a lot that it does. In the past, it would just look at the Azure workloads and then the Office 365 workloads. Now with MIP, there are so many things that you can do. You can also extend it to third-party resources and a lot. But at a very high level, Praveen, to your question, it's just the same, but just that AIP has been renamed to MIP now.
Hope that answers, Praveen. And with that said, I will.
I'll put it in the chat. Sure.
Sure, sure. All right. So I think with that said, I'll share my screen and I hope the screen is visible right now. All right. So quick thing about this, I think this have been a familiar interface to everybody who is attending or looking at the recording by now. This is the Defender homepage, and what we're going to do is, because we are talking about Microsoft Defender for cloud apps, we are going to go to settings and start with looking at an app which is not from a Microsoft landscape. So I'll go to settings, and once we are at the settings, we would go to cloud apps, and when the cloud app setting opens, we would look into the secondary left navigation and keep scrolling down till app connectors. And herein you would be able to see all the apps connected to your Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps instance. Here you can see Google Workspace connected, but having said that, let me also try to show you how technically you can connect them. And if I click on connect an app, you can see there is a huge list and there's a Microsoft documentation as well, how to configure, like that means what is the setting or what is the configuration you need to do on the third party app side or SaaS side, so that we can connect them, right? For example, GitHub, right? So we have done a Google Cloud Platform. You can do Google Workspace, or let me pick, I would say, let's scroll down, let's go to GitHub. So all it's going to ask is, I would say, GitHub instance. Let me do that, right? Go to next, and it's going to check if you have given the names. And this is the crux piece. You can enable it later, but ideally, this is what the recommended piece is, wherein we enable security recommendation. What this means basically is, once you connect a third-party app, right, that app will be connected to Defender Cloud Apps, and Cloud Apps can scan through that app and look at the standards of it. Basically, it can inspect various elements within it, which we'll be looking at it for Google Workspace in a moment, and then it can build up recommendation. And we're going to also show you what the recommendation looks like, right? So with that said, obviously, if I go to next, right, and here it says, right, the client ID, client secret, organization login name, enterprise slug. So all these details, right, it is available to the respective Microsoft Learn pages, which you need to follow to configure it in that GitHub site. That means if you're trying to connect or onboard an app which is not a Microsoft app, that has to have two parts of it. One is the configuration on the client side, wherein we will derive this inputs and then come and configure here. And then obviously there's an external link, and then GitHub is connected. That's what you do connection, right? So let me just quickly cancel it. And once you connect, what happens is, if I click on this Google Workspace for a moment here, it's gonna show up all the details, right? And let's assume that we connected this, let's say yesterday, or day for yesterday, right? When I did it for the first time, you will have an option to click on test now. So test now is basically making sure that the test is being set up, right? It is the connection being tested, and after that, once it is connected, it will start pulling out the information. And you can see basically the fundamental things over here, right? What are the things? And if I click on this, you can edit the settings. Let's say if you accidentally do something which is not the right thing, edit instance name, connect to Google Platform instance, things like that. So everything is available. It's not that once you do it set in stone, you can again redo it, right? Now, once that is done, right? So that's gonna tell you some sort of statistics was connected, what time it was connected. As you can see, it was yesterday, and the last activity also was yesterday because we did certain things. There's no account so far which is synchronized or figured out because we are using a very basic Google Workspace environment. Now, if I click on that particular app, and this obviously happens, and you will get a better visibility once connected. As you see here, right? when I was connecting a configured security recommendation. So that's a label, and we are also going to show what is the benefit of doing this. But first, look at the dashboard. It's going to give us a map view from where, because it was either me and Vignesh mostly were activating, right? We did some activities to make sure that the data is hydrated. And then active users, it's going to show 2 users, 1 users, things like that. Activity chart, right? And what's going to happen and all these details, right? Next thing is, obviously you can go to info. When I go to info, right, this is a very interesting piece, because Microsoft has already built the connectors or made available the connectors. Microsoft basically makes sure that these are, this is more of a compliance part than a security part, wherein you can actually look at, the security compliance, right? Because GCP is, or Google Workspace, is a very well-known platform, right? And then we're going to look at all the security being checked. This is done behind the scene by Microsoft, right? It's all the certification, what are the legal ownership and things like that. And if you want some relevant links, you're going to get it here. So this is the information what we do, right? And one connected instance, and what are the things it's going to look at. It's going to say all these details, right? Next is accounts. Obviously, you might not see anything because there's no account. Obviously, okay, so one has come up because it's only one account we're using it, and it is added to 2 groups. That's where you can see. And if I click on that account, that's gonna, show up a little more details. It's super admin there. It's external. It's last seen at what time? That's yesterday, right? I would We can go to view user page. Now, one thing to remember, this user is not exactly, this is not synchronized to Enter ID by any means. This is just from Google, right? Then obviously we go to activity logs. Again, we are still within the context of a third-party app. In this case, it's Google Workspace. So you see all the activities, what I have done: created file, created app scripts, created alerts, looked at certain things, logged on and things like that. Now, alerts, obviously, let's see if we have, there is nothing possibly, because yeah, we have just onboarded this, we have not created a policy. Then you can create all these policies, and there are a few templates available, which we would definitely like to show you in some time, right? So this basically, you can look at the fundamental details around the app, and what are the compliance reasons and what are the compliance policies, security checks done. All those things can be done, right, from a SSPN standpoint. Now, next thing is, as we have said, okay, give us the security recommendation also. So what's going to happen is we are going to scroll up a bit in the left navigation, and under I think it should be under exposure management. Let's go to overview. And in overview, obviously this is a mix of all the apps onboarded. So you might be able to see all the details over here, exposure and things like that, users with MFA. So let me try to click on that. And if you look at, this is what it needs an attention, and then it is where it is updated and affected resets, all these things. That means this is not a Google one. So you can see basically a mix and match of everything over here, right? But let me try to go to left navigation and exposure insights and initiatives. So if you go to initiative, these are domain initiative, which you would definitely get. And it is again by Microsoft. And these are business email compromise. Is there anything, CIS benchmarking, cloud security, critical asset protection if you configure it, right? So majorly there is no data. Identity security because it's available in this platform. Ransomware protection, yes. SaaS security, that's where you would see. And then if I look at SaaS security, right, missing best practices to manage the protocol. There are 4 recommendations: missing best practices, settings in a SaaS apps. There are 24. So basically, it's gonna tell you all the details around your SaaS, kind of metrics is over here, right? And it not only covers Google Workspace. It I can see that, right? You can look at all the following connectors available. So it starts on Microsoft 365, Salesforce, ServiceNow, GitHub, Okta, Citrix, and then you name, and then you almost have the majority of SaaS platforms available, right? Let's close it out here. And then if I go to little below, it's same thing, zero trust. So all these are basically domain initiative, and then the same thing is available for threat initiative, and then it's going to also give the trend wherever data applicable, right? So that's what we have as a part of initiatives available. Now, instead of matrices, I would quickly jump onto the recommendation part of it. Then when you look at recommendation, what I would do is, because it's little overwhelming, and it will feel overwhelming if you're working in an enterprise scenario. So either you can apply filters, or you can just go for search. I will search for Google standalone here, right? And if I look at, right, one of the recommendation has come up, and it has happened today itself, right? Yesterday we connected and it came in. And if I click on that, it's a non-compliant piece, right? It's coming from Google Workspace, and this is only available because you've connected the Google Workspace, right? And remediation steps. Obviously, you go to Admin Center, set up 2FA, and that should be it. And if there is any initiative you create out of it, and related metrics, whatever you want to do. And if you want to edit it, you just hit manage, and it's gonna, because it's third party one, right? It's not something you can configure within Defender itself. So you're gonna get to a specific vendor specific article where all those things are detailed out. Now, coming back to the left navigation again, we looked at initiates a bit. If we look at events, it's gonna, sorry, if you look at matrices, obviously there are 100% needs attention, 98, and all these things, right? This is a combined one where you can see all the initiative and matrices. Matrices basically through which your scores are calculated, right? So you'd get one for all here. Now, this is all about SSPM, starting from onboarding a third-party app and looking into it from an exposure management, perspective. Also, you can look at from an attack surface perspective, and then overall, you can look at it from a secure score and recommended actions perspective too, right? uh, Now, there's one quick thing here called data connector, and if I open here, right, so there's a little bit of thing here to understand. If you look at, these are basically either the systems which are a CMDB or a scanner. So till now it is only 4 connectors supported. So for example, we have connected GCP, we might connect GitHub, we might connect any other platform, whatever available, right? That's one way of connecting it. But if we also want to connect the scanners, like which basically scan multiple environment, so these are some well-known ones. You connect your Qualys instance, you connect your Rapid7, you connect your ServiceNow, you connect your Tenable, and then once you connect, you also going to see the data out of that, and they'll be plugged in or infused into your existing exposure management, and you can see them in a single pane of glass again, right? So there are these different ways also you can understand and extract your exposure management, and accordingly you can look at initiative metrics and recommendation. And if I go to events, obviously there's nothing much, because it's again as a fresh new environment, so it might be NP, but you would be seeing the events available here. So far, whatever we did mention, that was more of a demo around onboarding a third-party app, right? Looking into exposure management based on the security recommendation, and trying to have initiative matrices and recommendations out of it, right? And also the data connector supported. Now, next thing, what I'm going to do is looking at, so far the policies, sorry, the onboarding of the data is done, right? Now we are going to look at the policies as such, and then how you manage it. And for that, we would scroll down in the left navigation, and then under policies, which is the last option here, right? Under policies, we would see policy management. Why policy management? Because policy management has a really breakdown view of different kind of policies, right? Starting from threat detection, information protection, conditional access, shadow IT, and all policies, right? So if I go to conditional access policies, you can technically create, let me try to create one here, right? And you can see there are a few policies by default as appeared and created already. So you can create two kind of policies, session policy or access policy. So if I want to do a session policy, right? Let's say no template, either we can follow all these templates available, right? Or you can create your own, and then categories, let's say DLP. If you want to change it, you can change it. And then session control type, what do you want to do? So let's say you want to monitor, you want to block, when to control file with inspection, file upload with inspection. Both the things can be done. So if I go for block activities, let's say, right? Next thing is where you get to set the conditions, right? And I'm going to show you a couple of policies, whatever we have created, which is available here. And you can keep on switching the filters, add the filters. Also, if you want to enable content inspection, right? Let's say if I go for a particular stuff, right? If I want to match certain PII stuff or UK date and things like that as a part of inspection during in the file, right? All those things can be set and the file can be blocked for getting downloaded from, right? And obviously here is the action piece where you can audit or block all these details, all those kind of files. Now, coming back to the place, one thing that you need to also understand .com, for MCAS policies to work, or to be precise, the session control policies to work, that means that's a prerequisite what you need to do in an Entra ID to make sure that you are able to create policies in MCAS or Defender for Cloud Apps, right? So I would go to Azure and let's go to Entra ID, Microsoft Entra ID, and in Entra ID, I would go for, there is something called policies and conditional access policies. I'm going to click on that. And then once the policy appears, let's close it out. 5 users, one enable, view all policies. Then conditional app access for Office 365 obviously turned on. And what I'll do, I'll open the policy, and all I need to show you is, you see, it is specific user included. Obviously, I've included, this is a demo user with which we'll be demoing today. And coming to the resources, target resources is one also which you have scoped, right? It's Office 365, no network configured, condition, you know, it's basically these are the conditions obviously selected, include filter device, and those filter can be is compliant or something. Okay, and then this is the crux part of the policy where it says use conditional app access control, and that's where it is basically use conditional app access control is what I would do here, right? And technically this is one of the policies. Another thing what you need to also do is make sure that there's another policy here which would say use custom policy, right? Use conditional access control, sorry, use conditional app access control and use custom policy. That's where the policy need to be set. As I said, this is an example policy. So if I go back and look at other policies, I should be able to see that as well. Let's say MCAS policies or in the policies, right? Uh, so you have to make sure that that settings is turned on. Then in MCAS, you'd be able to create policies, session control policies, and things like that. So that's the fundamental step. Coming to the type of policies, let's say if we go for a threat detection policy, right? If I create a policy, so technically, and if you see, the policies are basically mapped by the type itself. So when I go to threat detection, I can create only activity policy because threats are identified based on the activities done. Now, again, the format is same, mass download by a single user. Let me go ahead with this template, and then it's going to ask me, I would say apply template. Then you can give it a policy name. You can say by default, it's a threat detection policy because that's where it came from. And then either I can say on a single activity, and in the single activity, I can actually put all the filters. Moment happened, alert gets created, and you have the governance action, what to be done, suspend the user. Like this is basically the thing what you could do, right? And you can see with Google Workspace, that's also started coming in because that's configured, right? Next thing is if I go for a repeated activity, it's going to ask within what time frame and how many things are getting repeated, right? And then based on that activity type, I'd say it's a download. It's the same condition, right? If it is a download, if it is external user, right? And if it is not from Microsoft Azure, be it any role, right? For any external user, if it is 5 downloads, or I'd say, in 1 minute there are like 50 downloads, that's a repeated activity, right? And alert limit is 5. That means you can create max 5 alerts. And you can create a remediation also in the policy, but that's fundamentally if you look at the policy, what can be created as a threat detection policy. Now, the next kind of policy I'll go back using the breadcrumb, and we will try to show you here as a part of information protection, which Bignesh did mention specifically, in his presentation, that as you can see, there are a couple of created already, right? We have created, and out of this only, I would like to demo one of these, how they look like. But let's say if I try to create a file policy, let me go ahead and try to create a file policy, right? I'll say Google Drive files, file shared for unauthorized domain. Let's not go there. Let's go very simple. We'll give a policy name, and it's a DLP policy. By default, it's low. You can go with medium or high, depending on what you need. Obviously, you put a description there, and then I'm going to add conditions. Let's say, for example, users are or sensitivity label, right? Different for cloud apps, and I would say maybe encrypted. That's one sensitivity level. For example, this is again applied to all the files, right? Applied to all the owners. Inspection method is data classification service. If you want to go, if you don't want to go, that's fine, right? Uh, or if you go for none, right? That's where you would be able to create a policy out of it, and this basically triggers, right? And give me 1 second. That's one example, right? So let me go back using the breadcrumb here again, and we are again under information protection policy, and I would let the policy creation tab load. As I say, that's a file creation policy, and we'd be able to create it, right? For example, if I try to open common custom rules, for example, or any rules for that matter, right? Anything shared, things like that, and that's about the one. And obviously, when you talk about MIP or like the labeling, that's again a part of information protection itself. That means you have your labeling enabled in your enterprise. That's again a part of purview, which you're going to show here quickly in a second, right? The next kind of policy is conditional access policy. But before we go there, right, let me try to bring you up a real-time scenario and show you here. So this is another user Adelvance, as I said, logged in here, and then what is to happen is we created a file here, right? If I click on this file quickly here, it's going to open, and you would see there is content in the file, which is basically looks like some sort of highly confidential thing. And I will let the label load here, so that I can basically show you what label is applied. As you can see, just give it a moment to load in. Yeah, it also appears in your client app, desktop ad as well. But if I click on that, you see it is labeled as highly confidential, right? And we have a policy created saying that, okay, block the download if it is highly confidential and if it is not from a domain joined machine. So in this case, we do not have a machine domain joined machine. And let's try to look at, right? If I go to file, if I go to create a copy, download a copy, obviously it's going to ask download a copy. And when I click on download a copy, you would see something like download blocks, right? And that's the one which blocked the download. So technically, this is how the information protection policies in MCAS works in reality. And again, a little bit of details here. When you create a policy, you can scope it to set up groups, set up users and things like that. In this case, we have limited only to this user, right? So that's what the behavior of the policy looks like, right? Now let's go back using conditional access policy here. And then if I open it up, as I was mentioning, right, there are these create policy options are really mapped based on the tab. So once I'm in conditional access, I can see access policies and session policy. So I'd say go to session policy here. Sorry, go to access policy. I'm going to give a name. And obviously you see there are like basically fundamental conditions here, right? And you can add more filters. It's if it's app, if it's an IP address, it's a location, it's a registered ISP, right? Whatever is the filters we want to, name it. It's a user from a group, from a name. Let's say I'd say group, select a user, and you can say manage user groups and things like that. If I go there, it's gonna go and take me to the user group. As I said, this is another thing I would say I would love to show you as well. Whenever we are trying to manage and do things to group, we can have users group, which is basically onboarded with apps itself. Like you onboarded GCP, it got created as a user, and then you can see it here, right? Oh, let's get back to the previous one using the breadcrumb, and we'll quickly go to the policy creation screen, right? Then you can put it into test mode or block mode, and whatever you do, it's going to appear in logs, right? That's about how you can actually apply you know policy for access control here. Now the next kind of policy what we are going to look like is I'll go to again conditional access, go to create a policy, session policy, right? This is another kind of policy, and every time if you look at, right, wherever there's a template available, you can really look at all these templates available, and you can apply one of them and then start creating on your own, right? So let's say if I go for monitor all activities and apply the template, you see it basically logs in everything, and by default it's set up and it's in audit mode because we want to only view, we don't want to block anything. And that's where you go. Now going back to the previous screen here, the next policy is shadow IT, which is also a very, very, important part of different for cloud apps. And I can create an app discovery policy, for example, here, and let's pick one of the template, right? So where you say, when we say, new risky app, or let's say, I'd say new CRM app, or let's try to be new popular app, new high volume app. If I apply this, right, apply template, you'd see the definition here. It's cloud discovery. You're going to give a name. It's already defaulted. You can change it. All continuous reports, apply a filter if you want to add, and an app tag, and go from there. And for example, the fundamental filter here is daily traffic is more than 500 megs. Now, if with your organization definition, let's say you are having really big user base, right? So 500 megs might not be a right number. It can be like 5,000 megs and things like that. Accordingly, you tune it and then create a policy out of it, right? And you can take governance actions wherever applicable. So tag that as unsanctioned, tag that as monitored, add a custom tags and things like that. Right. So that's about the shadow IT stuff. And this why shadow IT is important. That's basically, try to talk about the apps which is not monitor actively, right? Those are the things. And at the end, as I say, all the policies with the templates, you can see here, modify any of these and apply and go from there. And if I go to policy templates, it's again, it's the same policy management, just that you can only apply policy templates. For example, if I pick this template here, right, Google Drive files are not accessible through web results. So let's try to create a policy out of it, this template. And as I say, this is again sharing control and access level is public. So basically, it's going to scan all your Google Drive accessible file depending on the connector, and then because you have the connector connected with the right permission, you can actually take all these actions, right? As Vignesh was saying, like one thing is dynamic access control. Second thing is, try to make sure that, let's say you provide an access, right? Maybe you have opened something, made a drive accessible for some reason, and then you have a policy in such a way that once the purpose is done, it's basically made it private or notify user and things like that, right? Depending on your requirement, you actually change and create the policies over here. So that's about the policy template all across. Now, what you're going to do is quickly look at the activity log and what do you mean by activity log. If you remember a while ago, I demoed you that because of a policy created, we are able to block the download of a particular file from a non-domain joined machine. You can see here, right? It's blocked. So if I click on that, it says various details like which app it is, which IP address, location for me, time, right? What exact time when I opened it, and then active incident. Did it create any incident? No, it is just that we have blocked it. And user activity at last 30 days from here, because I'm logging in only from this country. Then what you could also do is user actions and view related activity. You look at all these settings and look at, suspend the user. So technically you can actually, from the activity log itself, you can also take some, action directly from here, depending on your analysis, right? So to summarize here, right, what you looked at, settings in cloud apps, we basically looked at a few things around how to onboard a third-party app under App Connector, right? And then once it is onboarded, we are obviously going to see the information around that. Then under policy management, we looked at the various kind of policies can be created, starting in threat detection, information protection. We also looked at a demo for information protection, where we have created a file wherein a label called highly confidential is applied, right? And then it is basically blocked for downloading from any device which is not within the domain, right? And then the conditional access, then the shadow IT, and a combination of all policies. You also wanted to share that to enable conditional access policies, you have to make sure that you create a you apply a custom policy template in Azure AD or Entra ID to make sure that these policies are effective and you are able to create and operate them. And then policy templates are basically the templates available across all the policies, wherein you can start using one of the template and then tweak it according to your need. And also the activity tabs, right, wherein let me get to the activity logs, wherein you can see the details around that. If there's a block, for example, in our case, we can look at the policy, we can look at the mashed files, we can look at the policy name, we can activity objects, location, and basically all the basic stuff there, right? So that's about the thing I would say. Technically is all about looking at and onboarding a third-party app, looking at security recommendation, which you also looked at in exposure management, looking at policies, applying policies. And then again, one thing to summarize, that once you start looking at different for cloud apps, it's not that once you create a policy that's set in stone. You need to keep on fine-tuning either the conditions or the threshold to make sure that the policies are working in your favor, not against you. So that means you really get optimized and high fidelity incident, right? So with that said, I'll give it back to Bignesh for anything you want to add.
Well, that's pretty much about it, Samik. I think you summarized everything, and that those are the demos that we wanted to show. So, I think you also spoke about the app governance, also, right?
Right there. Let's get to that. Yep.
Yeah.
Quickly, I'll show the app governance and let me share back my screen. That's a good point. So I'll let it load. So
Yeah.
basically, yeah, I mean, I think this is another important part, and thanks for highlighting, Bignesh, that once you have the app governance, this is like an automated page, like automated, scanning all the time. Whenever we have a new app, you can see there are categories. Like for example, if I go to 17 apps, fine, 5 hour privilege and highly effective. And if I go to Microsoft 365, let's say, to look at a little bit more details around the app, and we will understand where the apps are coming from. So we'll just give it a moment to load. If you see this app name, so these are nothing but enterprise application in your Entra ID. So I'll just copy this place, right, and then go to Entra ID here, and then go to enterprise applications, and let's try to find them. There you go, right? You can see the apps over here, and that's basically collected and monitored under all app governance. And now there is like Google connected. So I'd also go to Google, and obviously don't find anything because that's really a very new and almost a vanilla tenant. You get to see the alerts. It's a combined policy. You get to see the policies. Yes, you can. And also, as I was talking about, from the policy management itself, we can either create a policy from here, either securing app permissions or regulating app usages. So if I try to create a policy from here, let's say, right, we can look at a usage, increase in usage, new app usage. It goes like greater than 1 GB per day. Like the definition itself says it all, right? Or the permission one, overprivileged app, right? Once you create this permission, as I say, right, there are already 5 flagged marked as highly overprivileged. So it's going to flag it out. New app with non-API, non-graph API permissions, new highly privileged app, things like that. There's certain things on certification. There's a policy on activity, and you can always go custom where you can create your own. So if I go for permission over privileged app, go to next, it's going to create, you can decide the severity. This is another kind of also policy you can create here. Apply default settings. If you say I'll customize, you can customize and go next. And you want to do it for specific apps, you want to do for all apps, you want to have all apps except and things like that, wherein I'll go for all apps. and next. And then under overprivileged, you can edit the conditions as well. You can say no because you're talking about only overprivileged. You can also add other conditions like this is basically the error rate or whatever is available, right? So app governance gives you a holistic view of what's going on, or you can create policies also out of it. Now, I'd also like to look at the create policy access. I know for the secure apps, it's a similar thing. It's just that the things are different from an interface perspective. So you get to the same template. I'm going to choose under activity, you'd see, and then go to next. Under scope, I'll go high. And if you want to customize, you go next. It's going to be the similar, like there's no difference. Technically, it's more of like, for example, services accessed, sensitivity level accessed, any, and if you want to change anything out of it, you change it and create your own policy and get notified or get alerted. Obviously, there are other policies as well, but that depends on kind of policies, whatever you create in policy management. For example, these are all the things already created. You can also create a new one from here. This will again take you to this policy console, right? So yeah, I think that's basically the summary of app governance. If I may get back to that for a while, and that's about it.
All right. So folks, so yeah, so as we said, so those are the four main pillars that we wanted to showcase to you today. So as Samik was showing, so we spoke about SSPM, then we dived into information protection and threat protection. So those were the policy management stuff, and then we spoke about the app governance. So just also want to remind you folks that whatever we showed you on the past two sessions, that's just the tip of the tip of the iceberg, if you will, right? So there is a lot that this Defender for Cloud Apps can do. It's a huge product. There is just so many goodness that it can offer, and I would highly recommend all of you to start playing around with it. What we just showed you is just, let's say, 10% of what it can do. But if you really get into the weeds of it, there are just so much that it can offer, and it is really one of the best CASPs out there, right? We're not just saying that because we are Microsoft MVPs and we got to endorse the product and stuff. That's not what it is, right? None of us are getting paid for that, right? But then we've been using this solution for quite some time, and it's really wonderful. So that's all for the today's session. And with that, we'll also be ending the Microsoft Defender XDR webinar series for this year. So next year, the goal is to focus more on Microsoft Purview and Copilot for security and other Microsoft security and security products. So please stick around for us, stick around with us for the exciting journey that we have planned ahead. And if there are any questions, now would be the good time to ask. So you can just come off mute and ask your questions. Thank you. Yeah, thanks,